Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome at this ECOSYSTEX webinar this morning, which will be presenting a Horizon Europe input paper on research gaps and needs prepared by a large group of ECOSYSTEX experts. So our agenda for today, as you can see here on the slide, first I will be providing a short introduction into what ECOSYSTEX really is and how have we come to create this document that we are going to present today. Then I will be handing over to Lutz Walter to introduce the first chapter of the document, focusing on key innovation drivers and the systemic transformation. Then he is going to continue on the role of collaborative research and innovation, and then hand over to Gabriel to present the research and innovation gaps and needs focused chapter 4, and then continues on funding requirements and support instruments. He will then be handing over to Kathleen Janneke from Eurotex, who is going to present the STEP 2030 public-private partnership. Then we are going to have a short wrap-up, some conclusions, and then we are going to open for some questions at the very end of the webinar. As an introduction, I would like to tell you a little bit about what ECOSYSTEX is. With 23 EU-funded member projects, which are focusing on textile sustainability and circularity, ECOSYSTEX is the European community of practice for a sustainable textile ecosystem, and it has been launched formally earlier this year in January. We have a mission to accelerate collaboration in textile sustainability and circularity field. ECOSYSTEX as an initiative stems from one of the member projects, Svedotec, and is also supported by the European Commission's agencies REA and HADEA, and also the Circular Bay-based joint undertaking. Next slide, please. The objectives of ECOSYSTEX are threefold. We firstly want to make sure that we enhance inter-project collaboration within our member projects. We are also here to provide technical input to EU policy, and that's exactly why we are here today. And finally, we also want to make sure that we can provide a platform for joint dissemination for all our member projects and also what ECOSYSTEX does as a whole as a community. Next, please. Well, I mentioned the member projects several times. Here in the slide, you can see the logos of them, 22 of them actually. We have 23 member projects, but the last one only joined last week, the FIPSON projects, and they are so new that they don't yet have a logo. So they have yet to join the slide, and also they will be soon presented on our channels. Next. Since the kickoff of ECOSYSTEX, there has been a lot of work and effort put into building really this community of now 23 member projects. Also, we had several public webinars where we provided the opportunity to the members to really disseminate their efforts, their vision, and their recent developments. And we have been also working towards creating working groups so that we can really bring the first pillar, the first goal of ECOSYSTEX to life, which is inter-project collaboration. We have, by April this year, created 6 working groups, 4 of them focusing on technical topics. Here you can see them. So very briefly, what they are focusing on. The first one is focusing on environmental assessment and the PEF. The second one focuses on assessment of different recycling technologies and end-of-life options. The third technical working group focuses on eco-design, especially on SSVD and ESBR. And the fourth focuses on renewable materials and standards. How does it work? How do the working groups function? Every single member project that we have in ECOSYSTEX is invited to delegate experts in these working groups based on the profile of the project and also the profile of the experts themselves. In general, most of the experts are actually members of several of these working groups and provide their contribution and expertise in the work. Next. I mentioned we have 6 working groups. So besides the 4 technical, we also have 2 horizontal working groups, which we really see as they have a topic and a goal which really spans over all member projects and is relevant and interesting for all member projects. So the first one is focusing on research and innovation gaps and needs, and I'm not going into details on this one because that's the next slide. And the second one focuses on joint dissemination, which really is there to create this platform that I already mentioned before. You can also see a screenshot of the LinkedIn page that we have created for this purpose, where we disseminate the activities, the major achievements, the events even linked to any of the member projects, and again, also as ECOSYSTEX as a whole. And this dissemination working group also helps to prepare the first ECOSYSTEX conference that will take place in October this year. So now I'm really zooming in on the last, but also the first, as you can see here, the number, working group that we have, which is focusing on research and innovation gaps and needs. And this is the working group that in principle has created the document that we are presenting here today. This working group is chaired by Guy Breul, who is the EU Research Manager at Centexbel, and Lutz Walter, who is the Secretary General of the Textile ETP. Just a little bit of background on how this document has come to life. How did we prepare it starting about 2 months ago? First of all, we had a discussion within this working group to really identify the key topics that should be addressed in this document. Then we created an outline for the document itself. And then we had first a smaller group of experts whom we invited to provide feedbacks. And then we opened it to the larger full working group. We also had some other experts from other working groups chip in to really make sure that we are focusing on the right and most important topics, and we do not leave out anything else. And finally, we had a very large open discussion on the 5 key topics which are taken up in the research and innovation gaps and needs chapter to make sure that we are all on the same page. And the document really represents a consensus among all these experts, and then our working group leaders shaped the document into the form that you are going to be hearing today, and also you have had a chance to read since yesterday. And with that, I would like to really invite Lutz Walter to take over and start introducing the first chapter of the document.
Thank you very much, Camilla, and I'm glad to see that the audience is steadily growing now to 55 participants, so that's very good, and also very happy to see several participants of the European Commission and of the executive agencies here, so very warm welcome from my side as well, and also to the many participants that helped contributing to this work that we are presenting here today, which was actually a lot of work in a very short time. And I'm very, very grateful for all the inputs and really the enthusiasm that we have experienced putting all of this together. We understood that the European Commission is in a fairly, let's say, intensive process right now of working on those 2025-2026 priorities, strategic priorities for Horizon Europe. So we obviously wanted to make our contribution there, and we hope it is a useful and a welcome contribution that we make. So very briefly, what you see here is the structure of the document. So we start with a very brief summary of the key innovation drivers for that systemic transformation of the European textile ecosystem, the important role that collaborative research and innovation plays in this, and then we really dive into those research and innovation gaps and needs, which we have split into 5 big categories: scientific base of safe and sustainable textiles, eco-design, bio-based textiles, circular textiles, and then sustainable textile production and supply chain. And then we'll finish with a few words about the different funding requirements and support instruments that we believe this kind of program would need to be properly implemented, and a few conclusions. So that's the structure of the document, and that will be also the structure of the next few slides. So if we can jump right into the key innovation drivers. So there are many of them, and we really try to focus on the most important ones. So clearly there is a lot of innovation and change on the level of the materials that are being used in the sector, trying to move away from fossil-based and sort of linear material processes to more renewable and circular materials. Then when we look into the production process, to be as low impact and as resource efficient as we can be along this long supply chain from the making of the fiber to the final product. We then move to the products themselves, which should be during use as durable and as otherwise sustainable as possible. Then also businesses change their business models to favor consumption and production models that are more sustainable. On the side of design, there's a lot of digitalization and virtualization, which is important, and there's also increasingly artificial intelligence used to really deal with this wealth of data to support optimization, simulations, and these kind of things. On the manufacturing side, there is continuous drive towards more automation and more flexibility in view of more of an on-demand production, which we know is a very beneficial aspect if you want to be more sustainable. The supply chains should be much more digitized and in that process also become much more transparent, which is very important for many aspects, including a good information of the consumer or the customer making smarter and more sustainable purchasing decisions. And last but not least, we are in a process of moving towards more resilient and more regionally focused production and consumption systems, which also obviously in all logic should reduce footprint, will reduce forecasting errors if you produce in very long global supply chain. This is one of the major drivers of overproduction, and by moving to more flexible, more regional production consumption systems, so the sustainability performance should be better. So these are, in a nutshell, some of the key drivers. There are many more, and there are many more detailed ones that I will spare you, and we have discussed things a little bit more, obviously, in the document that we've shared. So if you move then on to the role of collaborative research and innovation, so not all those innovation drivers in the industry necessarily will be implemented through technology, but technology plays a very, very important and enabling role. And not all the technologies that we need are already ready, off the shelf, and usable by industry, so a lot of development is still needed. The problem is this industry is very much dominated by small and medium-sized companies, which by their nature have more limited resources, especially for in-house research and development. And for this reason, we have in this industry a history of collaboration in more local or regional clusters and districts. And in those regional clusters, research and development centers and also universities often play a very important role as trusted research and innovation partners for those companies. And so this collaborative research model is very deeply entrenched in the sector, and for a good reason, and should continue to play a very important role. In addition to that, for truly sustainable solutions, you need to innovate along the supply chain and sometimes also innovate cross-sectoral, or you need to involve new players in your supply chain, such as all those organizations or companies that deal with the end of life of products, whether it's collectors, sorters, recyclers, and so on. So also they need to be involved in this model and will need to be brought into a collaborative research effort. There's also need to pilot and rapidly scale up new solutions, which often is capital intensive and also carries high risk, which is a problem if to be carried by a single or small company. There's also important need to support technology transfer, so a very quick diffusion of new technologies to the many SMEs in the sector, and that also requires the upskilling and reskilling sometimes of the workforce, and really also a need to best practices as they emerge, wherever they emerge in Europe, to transfer them across Europe and obviously also beyond, because this is not a European only affair, but it's something where we believe Europe should and can go ahead and then show, let's say, an example where other parts of the world can aspire to. So in a nutshell, all of this cannot be simply done by the resources available within the companies in the sector or within the organizations that making up this value chain. But public funding is crucial, especially if you want to accelerate this green transition and want to see results at a horizon of 2030, which is actually a very short time horizon when you think about it. 2030 is about 6.5 years away, and a lot of these technologies are not yet mature, not yet industry ready. So there's a big effort needed. There are big risks involved in it, and if no public support is provided, then we risk looking at a market failure here, which obviously nobody wants. So therefore, in a nutshell, the role of collaborative research and innovation is absolutely primordial if we want to succeed in this transition. So let's then look into the specific research and innovation gaps and needs that we have identified. And you see the 5 topics nicely arranged here on one slide. So to quickly recap them. So the first one, the scientific base of safe and sustainable textiles. And I'll start with this point, if we can go into the next slide here. So there are many things that we don't know, or that we don't have really good data about safety and sustainability of textiles, of textile materials, of textile processes, of textile products, and the entire textile supply chain. Surprisingly little data in many cases, or where data is available, the data may be outdated, it may be very patchy and fragmented. So there is really an important need to collect fundamental data, really fundamental primary data, let's say from the cotton field all the way to the recycling operation, to really understand what are the fundamental knowledge pieces that we need to clearly understand and put together to make really well-informed decisions. So where data is available, it is not always accessible and not always shared in a sufficient way. So we have to make sure that whatever data is available is shared, is also jointly assessed, to make sure that data is consistent, that data is made available to those who want to build new systems, new business models, and also is made available to policymakers who have to take policy decisions that should be also obviously anchored in data. So on sound data, we can build also more robust data models, and we also have to make sure that the data that we have is interoperable, so it can be shared, it can be interpreted and understood by different actors in the supply chain, by different actors from research to industry to policy, and so on and so forth. Once data is available, we can make use of the data, obviously, for modeling, for simulation, for assessment. For this, we also need specifically adapted tools and methods. There's some general tools that are available and have been in use for assessment of safety, sustainability, and so on in other sectors like LCOs, LCAs, LCCs, PEF, and so on. Not all of this is currently well adapted to the textile reality. All of those tools have shortcomings. All of these methods are not necessarily very well established in the industry, so there is work to be done for development and adaptation of those standard tools and methods. And then we also have to do more work developing ontologies, framework, and models to allow really realistic simulation optimization of any innovation, any operation, any product that we want to make sure that it's more sustainable than the current alternative. In addition to technology, there's also non-technological drivers of this systemic change. So scenario building is a very important exercise to be done. Consumer behaviors, and when I talk about consumer behaviors, I don't only mean private consumers, but also professional users of textile and public users of textiles, or public procurers, play a very important role, and we have to better understand behavior models and also interventions and incentives that we can create to drive the right type of purchasing decisions. We also, policymakers, as I said, have to understand what kind of interventions and incentives they create have which kind of impact, whether these are extended producer responsibility systems, the digital product passport, the REACH system, and so on. All of these things create incentives, or can create the right incentives if done in the right way, but we need to understand what impact they really have. And then, very important to understand that whatever we do in Europe, we don't do in a kind of in a bubble. We are embedded in a global system and in a global value chain as well in textiles. So whatever we do in Europe has a global impact, and that impact may be positive, but also may have negative side effects. So we have to understand what these side effects are to make sure that this transition is not only sustainable and successful economically, but it's also fair socially. So this is a very important aspect also to research and understand much better. Now, if you move on to the second important topic, we identify eco-design. So using that short term for a very broad aspect of things, the very important point is to understand that design has a very, very important impact on many safety and sustainability and circularity features of products and processes. So models and tools need to be available that allow designers and product developers to assess product sustainability during the design process, to make smart decisions. They need to have methods also to assess and eliminate any hazards, whether they are human health or environmental hazards. We need also the decision making often happens in a very fluid, in a very high pressure, sometimes multidimensional process, where sustainability aspects and cost aspects and many other aspects play a role. And so we need to give designers tools to make those decisions, these decisions rapidly, effectively, and in a smart way. Then there are some new practices that need to be developed. SSBD is an important new framework to be applied, especially to material and process innovation processes. It's a relatively comprehensive, it's a comprehensive but relatively complex framework that we need to develop into something that is really practically applicable and usable by many material innovators and process innovators in the industry. These involves then also tools and methods to make complex technical and chemical assessments and optimizations. If we move on, there's also different design strategies depending on the type of objective you want to reach, whether it's durability, whether it's recyclability, reusability, repairability, and so on. Also, the reduction of unintended fiber or microfiber release is an important aspect. So for all these different design targets, we need standards and best practices that need to be diffused also among the designer and product developer community. We need to run pilots that show that these, for instance, ESPR or digital product passport driven systems are leading to the intended results. And we also importantly need customer decision support tools, both for consumers, but also for professional customers, so that they make the right decisions when purchasing textile products. And then there's a whole digital world out there which can be used in a much deeper way, in a much broader way than it's currently the case. So we should build digital twins of textile products, of textile processes, even of whole factories and supply chains, in order to play through scenarios without actually using any physical resources, and to optimize and find sort of the best sort of setups and configurations. And also artificial intelligence can help a lot, because these simulations and optimizations will be highly complex, will involve a lot of very dynamic data, and that is something that we need to build that doesn't exist today, but that can be very, very beneficial because the textile value chain is indeed very complex. So there's a lot on the design side that needs development, that needs pilot testing, and it needs diffusion within the textile ecosystem, and there's a lot of work to be done. So that was the topic number 2, eco-design, and now we move on to topic number 3, and here I will then hand over to the co-developer and co-author of this document, Guy Boyle from Centexpert. Guy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lutz, and also from my side, good morning to all. Maybe just before continuing, I would just like to add that if I look at it from a personal view, I think it was a very interesting exercise to collect all these things, and also a very rewarding one. And one thing maybe also to add, of course, we do not claim, let's say, that it's an exhaustive list. I mean, it is, let's say, what from the side of the experts, the people who contributed, we see as attention point as these gaps and needs. So if you now want move on with a key topic about the bio-based, then I guess it's logical to first of all look at the feedstock that we need and what kind of sources can be used for that. Of course, there is already quite some knowledge available, but I think that still has to be deepened, that we need to have a broader understanding there. And also a key aspect related to that is how to make an optimal use of the feedstock, how to do a good matching between what is available, how it can be processed, and then for what applications it is the most suited. And if you look at the fossil-based, I think it's fair to say that it took us, let's say, some decades to optimize that, to make this ideal matching. And of course, if you use bio-based materials, we will also need some time to find the optimal solutions. Another aspect of the feedstock is to see what is, let's say, available in a very efficient way. And then that translates into what side streams, what waste is available that can be used. An important aspect there is undoubtedly the industrial symbiosis, because maybe what for other people is a nuisance, is waste, can be very valuable for something else in different directions. And also an aspect that is quite crucial is that, of course, it cannot be the goal that with selecting new crops, we create also, let's say, new problems. So we will have to choose them very well in terms of the feedstock, the properties that one needs, but also in terms of a wider positive effect it can have. For example, we can look into growing crops or harvesting crops that can have a beneficial impact on nature. Think about the regeneration and so on. Then another crucial part is, of course, the fiber making. There, first of all, the key challenge will be that we have now some very well established synthetic fibers, and that we need good alternatives that are bio-based, also available in sufficient large quantities with the right properties and so on. And that brings us to the topic just below about this functional improvement, the functionalities of the fibers. Of course, if one switches to bio-based, one tries to, let's say, mimic or cover as much as possible the properties of the existing material, but this will be never 100%. So we need to see what performance, what elements are already there, what still has to be improved. And one aspect there that I think is sticking out and is about the longevity of the material. Came back in the survey that, or the input that we got, that there is definitely still some need to better understand the long-term behavior of these new bio-based materials from fiber side, but I guess also from the side of the use of these biomaterials as additives, as finishes, and so on. And if we then continue with this part, then of course we need to develop the necessary biochemistry to make this possible, to not only make fibers, but also do the finishing, the coating, and so on of the textiles in a bio-based manner. topics that were raised there include definitely also the use of the adhesives, the materials needed to do lamination, to make the coating. And they're also keeping immediately in mind what will come after this about the circular use, so that we need to have the materials maybe with reversible adhesive function and so on. And then also develop the necessarily biocatalytic processes, because if you work with a different class of materials, it's also logical that for some of the processing, we will need to switch to new type of processing. If we then go on with the next topics on bio-based, then it was already mentioned a bit before, but performance is definitely a very important aspect. And that, first of all, comes back into the actual manufacturing process, because the materials might behave a bit different, will behave a bit different. So when it comes to process settings, there will be some adaptations needed. But also if you look at the hardware, the actual equipment used might have to be adapted, because even if we try to match the properties as good as possible, there might be some deviations that also really require different processing equipment. And also in the use, this is seen. So the behavior, the performance, the expectations of an end user might have to be slightly adapted, because fundamentally we use a different type of materials. And important there then will also be to find a good balance between the cost aspect and the delivered performance of these new materials. Of course, we talk about sustainable textiles, and then the key element is what to do at the end of life with the materials. That holds also for non-bio-based textiles. But especially here, since we use a new material, we should also be aware of it, that in the beginning, if one introduces a new polymer and so, that it will be available, of course, in relatively small amounts. That means that when it comes to the end of life management, we should think about how we can deal with it, because if it's small amounts, it might be really a challenge to detect it in the waste streams, to sort it out, to do the necessary separation. Also, when the materials are then, let's say, singled out, we should ensure that we have the proper recycling processes in place. Of course, for a large part, this could be the same processes as for, let's say, the classical textiles, but the new class of bio-based textiles might also enable novel recycling processes, for example, more biocatalytic or enzymatic processes and so on. And then one specific aspect that also holds actually for some fossil-based ones is, of course, the biodegradation, which can be an elegant end-of-life option, but we should add immediately that from a sustainability viewpoint, it probably will need the necessary research and looking for which cases that make sense, for which other end-of-life options will be more suited. So to distinguish there is definitely an attention point. And then if we, that I think comes or brings us immediately to the next point about the impact studies, because switching to bio-based in itself might sound attractive, might sound sustainable, but one has to do it with care and has to very well understand all the impacts it brings. And so in that sense, we have the attention point here about, please, let's have a look at the holistic impact. What does it all entail? And especially that we're aware of potential trade-off or unwanted effects that switching to bio-based might have. And that, of course, this type of studies would have to be done to compare different feedstock, different options for bio-based among, let's say, or in the group of the bio-based to make there the best selection, but also to make comparison with current fossil solutions and to see, let's say, maybe for some things, we have to be careful. And I think we can also only motivate to switch to bio-based solutions if there's a well-founded study that motivates it and that justifies it. So this is about the bio-based aspects. And then we can go to the next topic, which is about the circular textiles. And there, if you go to the next slide, we can see the first item that was that came up and was highlighted is that actually before, let's say, discarding, we should make sure that during the lifetime of the textiles, we use it, let's say, in the most intense and as long as possible way. And for that, there can be further development into technical solutions that make such lifetime extending, lifetime intensifying ways possible. Then we think about technical solutions for reuse, for repair, refurbishing, remaking. So quite a wide range of different topics. On the other hand, what can also improve, of course, the viable lifetime of a product is if there is sufficient care and maintenance during the lifetime. Aspects like scaling up the professional implementation of that to see how such more, let's say, appropriate, more tailored care and maintenance of products can be organized. And then an important part when it's about the use is, of course, to have all players on board. And then we think especially of the consumers, and also there to think of new ways, or maybe existing ones, but to make them more popular, to, let's say, reward the consumers for a more sustainable use of the products. Then if at the end, let's say, we come at the discarding of the textile products, then we have the aspect of collection and sorting. And of course, the collection has to be organized in a way that it's, let's say, straightforward, easy for actors to bring it back. But one key element we see there is to make sure that during the actual collection process, there is no further, let's say, destruction of the value of the textile, because sometimes by, let's say, mixing or putting waste streams together, it can cost, let's say, a lot of effort afterwards to again get back to before they were mixed. So an intelligent, smart way to collect, really trying to keep as much value in the textile waste streams as possible. And what is closely linked to that is the sorting afterwards. I think it's quite clear that more automated at higher throughput sorting is needed. And with sorting, we mean there, depending on the application, the identification of the materials, but definitely also some other, what is called here, soft aspects, like what is the, let's say, the status of the item. Is it still wanted? Is it, let's say, an item that is very well suited for resale? Is it something that is still in a nearly perfect shape, or is it worn a lot? Is it damaged, and so on? And then, of course, when we talk about collection and sorting, it's basically a logistics operation. So we should look for solutions with a minimized environmental footprint, but also very important with a minimized economic cost, because in the end it will determine a lot about the margin there is to process textile waste into secondary raw materials. Then if we continue on with the next aspects of the circular textiles, the next slide. And we have, of course, let's say the core aspect, and that's the actual textile recycling. And there, one of the of course, the core element is how to do the actual recycling. There we refer to the four, the most common ones, so the mechanical, thermomechanical, chemical, and biochemical processes. Some of them are already well established. Some need a bit more development, need scale up. And also when it comes to improvement, especially to what input material they can handle, but also what output they can give, that there is still a lot of optimization to do. But also especially on how to prepare the materials for the actual recycling. So then we talk about cleaning, maybe some other pre-treatments, the necessary separation, and so on. That holds for most types, but especially if we have more complex materials, or for example, contaminated textile waste. And one discussion point that we should also not forget about is that, of course, the preferred way is to do textile-to-textile recycling or fiber-to-fiber recycling, but we should also be very well aware that that might not always be the most efficient, maybe the most elegant solution, so that we should also be open for open-loop solutions and scan for ways to use the textile waste in an optimal way. And then if you look at some more transversal aspects related to the circular use. It's maybe a bit more bookkeeping approach here, just highlighting some items, but still. I said, just like for the bio-based, we're convinced that impact studies are needed to see does a certain recycling process even make sense for certain types of waste, because it might demand so much energy, be so inefficient, so that we can really make well-founded decisions. Of course, there's the safety aspect for during the textile waste processing, but also if we put things back onto the market, that it's safe again for users. The aspect of the standardization that can definitely help to smooth processes to go from one step to the other, and especially there, like what input, what output can one expect from a process, what can you deliver as input to a process. Also, when we look at how textiles are currently being sorted, are being processed, that at the workplace can probably be made, let's say, a bit more up to date about sometimes the use of new technologies, robots, semi-automation, and so on. Also to promote the use of more circular textiles and the methodology, the whole logistics behind it, that public procurement and doing that in a circular way can be a very interesting driver for it, and that it would be good to develop guidelines, best practices for doing such procurement. And then what also brings us to the next topic, of course, the digital aspect, the making sure the necessary data solutions are in place can support going to really circular textiles. And with that, we come to the next point, which is then about the production and the supply chain for sustainable textiles. And if we then go to the next slide, we can see there the first topics, where we see as one key element, of course, when it's about production, to try to go to net zero emission production. That means, for example, that when we do the textile processing, that we think we need some developments towards doing that in a more electrified way. And then, of course, with the idea one can use renewable energy there, but also for other resources like the water use, the chemical use, that we need processes that further minimize this use. And of course, where it's not the case yet, try to use closed loop processes, so immediate reuse of the chemicals, the water. Elements that can help there are, for example, the continuous online measurement of the use of the resources, the consumption, and also to try to, let's say, time consumption in line with maybe other processes, typical consumer behavior to avoid peak moments of, for example, energy use. And an important one when it comes to the production will also be to see how to adapt processes, how to adapt technologies to integrate secondary raw materials. Because again, it's a bit of repetition, but like with bio-based materials, they might have slightly different properties that will also hold for most of the recycled materials. So also there, we need to take it into account and make the necessary adaptations. Then when it is about production, it of course also is clear that some automatization, robotization will be very crucial. There, I think a lot of opportunities exist, and a couple of the things we highlighted in the document is, for example, the more local manufacturing, on-demand manufacturing, to prevent overproduction, because as also stated in the European Textile Strategy, the issue of unsold products is really big. So if we can switch there to more on-demand, that could definitely help. And then if you look at this type of production, then we also see a role for smaller scale production, like in micro factories, especially if they can be sufficiently digitized, automized. And then if we go to the actual digitization aspect, then of course there is the issue of the digital product passport. I think it's quite clear, still quite some aspects for that need to be further developed, to be put in place, how to make it sufficiently interoperable, for example, how to make it secure. But also, if we look at the digitization, then that we see a lot of opportunity for making the textile production chain more transparent and also more traceable. And also that let's say, with the necessary digital platforms that they can really help, for example, for this traceability, transparency, but definitely also to enable more circular business models for more sustainable use of the textiles. Then if we go to the next slide, then of course in the title we have the supply chain, so that also integrates the logistics points there that could be further developed and can really bring or will be needed to put in place is like reverse logistics, because if we really want a circular use of materials, we have to make sure that the missing part of the value chain is of course there, but also looking back at what was mentioned just before about on-demand production, then also something like last mile logistics becomes very important. But that also means that we have to think carefully about the footprint of the supply chain and also try to minimize it. And a specific aspect also can be to try to have a better matching of the demand at a certain moment from production side with then the supply of the raw materials. And finally, within this topic, then we also have the attention point of resilience and the strategic autonomy. In order to move towards there with the sector, then first of all, we need to have the necessary production capacity in place, for example, for the critical raw materials, for chemicals, and so on. And then the other part of it is that we have to think very well on how to structure, how to organize this capacity. And there we see a big potential for doing it in a more local, regional aspect to cluster these activities and so on. That was it from the side of the different or the 5 key actions that were defined. We now go on, then I would still like from my side to also make the switch to another element that we identified in the document we talked about, and that's about funding requirements, support and the support instruments. In the document itself is also a small assessment of, let's say, the framework programs, now Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe. And I think from that side, I think it's very fair to say that it's a very attractive instrument. And I think there's a very clear proof for that, and that are the success rates. So I think it's far more attractive than availability. And one of the elements there that I think plays an important role is the option for the collaborative research projects, because it's quite fair to say that it is very well suited for technology development for some small scale pilot testing. So in that sense, a very good instrument. But we also see room for some other instruments, and maybe to get a bit more also of those. Then there's, first of all, the coordination and support actions. So, for example, for elements that Lutz mentioned in the beginning, maybe some of the more scientific aspects about data collection or for doing impact studies. Then another instrument is the cascade funding, which has the big advantage that it has a very low threshold to participation for SMEs who are not so much used to take part in European projects, also to reach a very wide, let's say, audience of companies, so for aspects like technology diffusion. On the other hand, if we look at the challenges that we face to go to sustainability, to circular use, then we see the need also for some large-scale demonstration projects, probably larger than what a typical collaborative research project allows. So that's why we also see something like the flagships that they are already in CBE. And then, of course, think of startup scale-ups, also some really risk capital, think the type of venture capitalists and so on. And one thing we would also propose is that in the end, funding available through the framework program is actually only a very small percentage of the different type of resources available for doing development and so on. So we see there definitely linking finding synergies with national regional funding, and then especially for things like backup funding for very well evaluated proposals on European level, but that did not make it. And there has been in the past these efforts with like Seal of Excellence. I think this type of actions could really be of help and create a lot of benefits, both for the project itself that failed, but also for local authorities wanting to fund highly ranked, very promising research. And so with that, I would like to come to an end from my side. I think we have these different suggestions for support instruments. Some are already there, some might be thought of. And ideally, of course, these could be grouped and done in a, let's say, more coordinated way. And that's why we think that European public-private partnership would also be very interesting for the textile sectors. But for that, I would like to hand over the word further to Catherine from Eurotex.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Katrin Jenecke. I'm Senior Policy Officer for Innovation and Skills at Eurotex. Maybe shortly, what's Eurotex? Eurotex is the European Apparel and Textile Confederation. We represent roughly 160,000 companies in the textile ecosystem with a workforce of 1.3 million people, and we are a member of ETP, and we were also observer in the ECOSYSTEX working group for this innovation gaps and needs. So we're working hand in hand with ETP and ECOSYSTEX that are providing the technical input for our policy work. So thank you all for providing this crucial input paper for our endeavor to push for, as Guy mentioned, the proposal for our dedicated textile partnership under Horizon Europe, which we have internally called STEP 2030. STEP is Sustainable Textiles European Partnership, and it should serve to create an innovation space for the whole textile ecosystem, including leather and footwear, and of course covering textile manufacturers, fashion brands, research centers, and bed providers, all the possible stakeholders to help the sector to join research and innovation forces to master the twin transition. We're in the second wave of the program, and we are in the middle of the selection process of the candidates for possible new partnerships. So we have exactly 11 proposals on the table. It's already the second slide, but I will briefly mention it. Exactly, we have created a proposal for a dedicated textile partnership with DG Grow. We have the support of DG Envy and DG Agri, and our proposal has already been submitted to DG RTD. As I said, there are also other proposals on the table from very important other industry sectors. But we are pushing from our side. We have a very short timetable until the end of the year. Therefore, we have drafted already a partnership manifesto that we have provided to the Commission, and we will use now this ECOSYSTEX input paper to beef up the document and to demonstrate the needs that should be covered with this dedicated program. The member states have also a very big say in the selection process, so we are also reaching out to them together with our members, and we are currently collecting industry support for the setup of the partnership. So we are reaching out and have already also a support of Lansing, Karl Mayr, Sauers, big manufacturers, fashion brands, as I mentioned. Hugo Boss has signed. Our partner Inditex is interested. We have, of course, also the research centers. So CITEVE is a signature, but also Centexpel as this organizer of the meeting. So there is backup from the industry pushing for this proposal, which is crucial in the transition until 2030. Lutz was already mentioning it. It's now the moment to invest in innovative technologies if the sector should really overcome the changing environment. I mean, sustainability is a topic, but also digitalization. So there's a lot to do. Therefore, we try to push for this dedicated textile partnership under Horizon Europe, and we hope that we have good support from also the Commission side and also from your expert side for this.
Thank you.
This is all from my side.
Thank you very much, Katrin. And that was a perfect handover to our concluding slide. So I can echo what Katrin has said, that the green transition, which is what we are looking at from the ECOSYSTEX side, clearly requires we believe, a comprehensive European research and innovation program. It requires a very broad spectrum of support instruments that Guy has also explained in more detail. It requires a strategic governance and a community of practice approach, which STEP 2030 and ECOSYSTEX can provide kind of hand in hand to make sure that those various projects that are supported are not sort of fragmented efforts, are not running kind of in parallel, reinventing the wheel 20 times. And obviously, all of this should be accompanied by a conducive legal framework to incentivize innovation, to reward innovators and innovative businesses, but also accompanied by mitigation policies to deal with unwanted side effects that such a transition will necessarily bring, whether in Europe or elsewhere in the world. And that also refers then to the fair transition, that we have to make sure that that this transition is not only successful from a technological or from a business or from a strictly sustainability or environmental point of view, but also is a success from a social point of view. That is a very important pillar of sustainability. So we believe that the 2020s, and there are only 6 years left in the 2020s, should be really the investment decade if we want to reap the real impacts, the real sustainability benefits in the years 2030 and onwards. So the investments have to be made. They have to be made in a concerted way. They have to be made in a coordinated way. And we hope that with this paper, we can contribute our small share in the intelligence that it needed to make those investments in the right way and to implement the programs in an effective way. So this is what we hope. And with this, I would like to conclude. We wanted to make it quite comprehensive today. Still, I would like to give maybe 5 minutes of opportunity for anybody here in the room to make a comment, to pose a questions. We don't want to go into very detailed technical discussions here. The paper is available. It will be made available very widely. So there's a lot more in the paper that we could really present to you here in a few minutes. So I would really welcome or invite you all to read it very carefully and to provide feedback to us. But if you have any sort of very spontaneous feedback or any questions right now, please feel free, raise your hand, digitally speaking, and we'll give you the word. Just in the interest of time, try to be relatively concise. Any reactions? Yes, we see Jurien, please.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering for the public-private partnership if you will have any collaboration or communication with the CBE, so the CBE-JU, the bio-based public-private partnership.
Katrin, would you like to?
For sure, there are synergies with other partnerships and other programs. As I said, it should cover the whole ecosystem, and therefore will have also impacts on other initiatives. But for now, as I said, it's a candidate for partnership, so it's not yet selected. So we will see that at a later stage if we will be chosen, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. Any other question or comment? I see that is not the case. Oh, yes, there is one. Ruska from the Research Executive Agency. Yes,
yeah.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting paper that covers almost all of the major aspects of the textile industry. Of course, the consumers are a major actor of the whole process. Do you plan to involve them in some activities related to textile, for instance, textile recycling, or something that can help them to have better information and to be able to choose the bio-based textile, for instance?
Well, thank you for the question. As you've seen, the consumer and the consumer behavior and the consumer decision making was something that came up in several aspects here. Obviously, the input that we're giving or we try to provide is for a research and innovation program, which is primarily focused at, let's say, professional actors providing knowledge, providing tools, providing technologies. So some of these technologies and tools should be and can be used by consumers. I think the digital product passport is a very important element that should also help consumers to take better decisions when it comes to sustainable consumption. And a lot of knowledge and also technology will be needed to bring that digital product passport to the consumer in a very easy, in a very accessible way. So I think there will be a lot of research going on to make consumer decisions easier, to make consumer decisions smarter, to incentivize the right consumer behaviors. There are other aspects than research and innovation that probably also are needed when it comes to education, when it comes to incentives, and all of that will probably come through other policies. But for us, the consumer is an important aspect. But we also stress very importantly that textiles are not just used by consumers. A lot of textiles are used by businesses. A lot of textiles are used by the public sector, and also these users play a very important role, and we should never forget that. So
okay,
yeah,
very good. I wish you a lot of success in this occasion.
Thank you very much. And I see also Christina would like to make a comment. Christina, we cannot hear you yet. Your microphone is still muted.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So thank you very much, Lutz and Guy and the rest of the team. As you know, the Research Executive Agency was really behind this initiative, ECOSYSTEX initiative, and we are actively supporting as much as we can. And we are actually very happy to see this input paper for the gaps and needs in terms of research and innovation. And our wishes, and also a message for the colleagues from the different DGs present today, our wish is really to continue the dialogue with the Commission to make sure that the work done by already the EU-funded projects is going to be picked up in the future programming. So we will really looking to see how we can continue this dialogue to really look more into detail into these priorities that were already put here and presented, and to see how we can see this put into practice into future funding. So this is our wish and message.
Well, absolutely, Christina. That's also our wish. So this document is our opening salvo in a certain way to the policymakers. So we are happy to engage with anybody who wants to know more about it, who wants to dig a little bit deeper in some specific aspects. We're absolutely available to do that. And I see also Simone, our strong supporter from the Circular Bio-Based Europe undertaking, also would like to make a comment. Simone, please.
Thank you, Lutz. Yeah, I back what Christina just said. I think it is very important, and it has been in a quite short period a quite interesting exercise that has been made by you and the member of the working group. So certainly. I see very interestingly that the bio-based part has a quite significant extent in the document. So for sure, I will share also it internally, and we will discuss it internally in order to ensure the uptake of these inputs in the next programming, as in the CBE, with the colleagues at the GRTD and the big consortium. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Simone. It's very much appreciated. Okay, and so very quickly now, I see we're running 5 minutes over. So we will, just for your information, so the document is a public document. We will share it widely. We will, obviously, we already distributed to all the ECOSYSTEX community members. So we will provide it also through our social channels. We will provide it also, we make sure Christina, that it reaches the colleagues in the European Commission. And any input, any feedback on this document is very much welcome. Before I let you go, I would like to hand over for 1 minute to Camilla, who would like to update you on 2 of our upcoming activities, because as you know, ECOSYSTEX community doesn't stop with the delivery of this document, quite the opposite. There's a lot of activities that are ongoing and 2 specific ones that you may want to put in your agenda. So Camilla, please.
Yes, thank you. So indeed, well, of course, behind the curtains, the working groups will continue their work, their collaboration, but we also have some upcoming events. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have organized already several public webinars where the ECOSYSTEX member projects could present their developments, and one of those next ones are coming up in mid-September. We are going to, end of September, we are going to turn it into a series called ECOSYSTEX Insight Series. And we are planning to introduce 4 recent joiner projects, our Light Biocom, Regio Green Text, ProPlanet, and FIPSON in that webinar. And we're also busy preparing our very first ECOSYSTEX conference, which will take place between the 18th and 20th of October in Barcelona. I dropped the link in the chat. That's my final sentence. Please, I invite you to follow the LinkedIn page of ECOSYSTEX, because that's where we are launching the registrations for all the public events. That's where we keep you updated about all the developments, and that's where we're going to publish the document that we just presented this morning as well. So that's the best way to stay in touch. You also have my email address as a contact point, as I sent out the calendar invite, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and then I will be able to direct you to any other partners and colleagues who can best answer your questions. And I think with that, we are ready to wrap up. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the experts that participated in the procedure of putting this document together, and we hope to stay in touch and hear about you soon. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to all our contributors, and we will stay in touch.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.